Good morning and welcome to today's executive briefing. New thinking for a workforce, young people in education and care. My name's Scott Ebury. I'll be the host for today's session. We've had a great turnout actually, and clearly this is a topic that resonates with many of our audience. But before I get into introducing our expert for today's session, I'd just like to cover off a couple of housekeeping duties. The presentation will run the conversation will run for about 30 minutes. If you do have any questions, please use the Ask a Question box in the screen. We'll aim to address these during our conversation, but if it proves that we don't have enough time, please don't fret. We'll absolutely be in contact with you to cover that off. And look, if you do have a reason to leave early, which we understand everyone's busy, please don't worry, as we'll be able to forward a recording of the session to you for your review. So today's session, New Thinking for a New Workforce, Young People in Education and Care, is really about investing in young people through tailored traineeships and targeted recruitment solutions can help address today's workforce gaps while building tomorrow's leaders in education and care. And so our speaker, Amaresh Devanson, Amo, the founding executive director of Y Careers, has joined us today to take us through that. Amo is leading the development of a bold new model that connects purpose-driven employers with young talent, creating meaningful career pathways into the care economy and beyond that. With over 15 years experience across education, employment, and social enterprise leadership, Amo has dedicated his career to removing the barriers and unlocking opportunities, especially for young people, often overlooked by traditional systems. From launching hundreds of Indigenous traineeships at AFL Sports Ready to driving innovative partnerships and funding strategies, his work is always centred on impact, inclusion, and equity. And Amo brings a strong background in business, training, and workforce development, and has served on the board of Black Duck Group, a First Nations startup incubator. He's passionate about reshaping how young people enter and thrive in the care sector. For benefit and for the audience, Y Careers is a government-supported social enterprise backed by the Y, which is formerly YMCA, and they're tackling two of Australia's biggest workforce challenges. Number one, the high rate of youth underemployment and unemployment. And number two, the need for skilled workers in aged care, disability support, and childcare. So without further ado, welcome, Amo.
Thanks, Scotty. Great to be here.
So for those who are new to Y Careers, can you tell us who you are and why Y Careers, it's a bit of a mouthful there, but why Y Careers was established in the first place?
Ultimately, we still have systemic issues across youth unemployment being double the national rate. And we know that we have a looming, if not current, workforce shortages across the aged care sector. So we were established and developed to bridge that gap and try and create opportunities for young people in the care economy to help with workforce shortages, but also to tackle and address the problem of youth unemployment or youth underemployment still being double the national average.
Okay, so we know that Gen Z or Z, what do we call it? Z. Let's go with Z. My kids talking Z. Gen Z will make up a third of the workforce in the next decade. So why has this generation been so underrepresented in education and care roles until now? And what's changing?
There is definitely a shift, Scotty, but at the same time, young people in a lot of these sectors are underrepresented, and the aged care workforce and the support care workforce has traditionally had an older demographic. Bernard Salt released an article in The Australian a couple of weeks ago that actually talks about the shift in that due to the demand that we're having. So we know that typically in Australia, we have an aging population at the moment, 85 plus, there's about 534,000 people right now, but by 2071, there's going to be 2 million people over the age of 85. So there's a demand, obviously, in the sector, and traditionally, the sector has employed people between the mid-40s. We know now with the home care launch and the packages and the NDI funding that the casualisation of that labour force has had the attraction of some young people, but it hasn't been to the impact where young people traditionally are looking to walk into these roles. Maybe in the education sector around basically the ECEC or early childcare sector, we've always had the plethora of young people coming through that system, but in the other two care economies, it hasn't been so traditional. And so we're looking at different ways to do that and different ways to break down the barriers and dispel the myths about young people wanting to work in these sectors.
So why do you think that is the case? Why are young people not necessarily going into those latter sectors that you talked about?
I think it's been a real barrier for young people to understand that there is value in terms of what that work would look like in the future of work. And I think traditionally employers also, because they are highly complex, compliance-driven organizations where they do have complex needs and they do have complex patients and they do have complex people working in those sectors, that traditionally it hasn't really been available to young people to come in at level entry programs. So today, though, we're seeing a shift in that. We're seeing some organizations really changing their mindset and really understanding that there is value in employing younger people or unqualified younger people to gain their qualifications along their journey and come into the area. And I think the other one is that there were a lot of myths and a lot of probably negative stigmas attached to these industries where they maybe seen as low pay or it's a casualized workforce or the work's not exactly enticing. So I'd rather work in different sectors. But Y Careers was co-designed with young people, and what the young people told us is we do want to work in these sectors. We do care about an aging population of Australia. We do want to give back to community. We do want to work with young people and care for them, and we actually do care about the future of people in these industries. So part of the design with Y Careers was to say that let's embrace what those young people are telling us and create pathways and different solutions where young people can be embedded as the future workforce in these industries.
Okay. So what are some of the most common misconceptions about hiring young people, and how can we begin, and for the audience, to shift their employer mindsets? Because it sounds like without these guys, we're not going to have too much ability to actually service these industries long term.
I think the common misconceptions have always been around the fact that young people, and maybe it's Gen Z, and we're getting ready for Gen Alpha now, right? So, is that they're not so resilient, or they job hop, or they're entitled, or they're privileged, and they come and ask to be the boss in 30 seconds, and that's all a bit too hard, or they're going to go challenge the industry, or they're going to be really, really hard and difficult to manage. Now, that's potentially something that we have to adapt and learn and understand. Young people who are in Gen Z have grown up with technology. They've grown up with the ability to have a voice on a platform, on a social type media, and give that voice and be heard. So young people are wanting to be heard. They're definitely wanting to challenge the status quo. And young people want to be able to, work in organizations where they feel valued and they feel that their work is meaningful and it is contributing to a purpose. Young people today will leave an employer if they don't feel valued and they don't feel that the work is meaningful and they don't feel like they're contributing to something that has a higher need. Even if you pay them more, they'll leave the higher paid job if the work is meaningless, then go and get a lower paid job where the work is meaningful. So we have to accept the fact that this is the future of your workforce. As you said near the beginning, 40% of the workforce is young people. Gen Z today, the oldest Gen Z today is turning 30. They're in your businesses and they are coming as we have an aging workforce in Australia. So the mind shift has to be around the fact that how can we be adaptable? How can we provide flexible work as well? Flexible work can come in many different ways, but young people are demanding flexibility. They're demanding the fact that this is what they want to be able to do. So if we are rigid, if we stay very traditional in our methodologies of employment or creating environments that are Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 in an office building only, noting that service industries, you have to turn up and be there to work with the residents and work with the young people and be there. They won't stay. They'll go and find something else where they feel they're getting better value for their time or they're contributing in a meaningful way.
Yeah, okay. So Y Careers offers more than just traineeships, though, doesn't it? I mean, you're supporting employees with recruitment, career coaching, entrepreneurship programs, managed workforce solutions. How does it all fit together? Can you explain the benefits of how that all works and why the audience should really start to give consideration to this as being a genuinely viable option for them?
Y Careers being co-designed with young people, we're amplifying and understanding the needs of what young people want. So through any of our models, it has been co-designed with young people to provide an opportunity to say, this is the best way forward, or this is a really great way of embracing young people and valuing them and understanding they will bring innovation. They will bring challenging arguments to maybe change processes. They'll bring the ability to, look at tech solutions with you. They'll bring so many different things that probably we haven't really taken the opportunity to value that. It's really interesting because if you look at the fact that something like hospitality, a 21-year-old in hospitality can run a 4.5 million, $7 million McDonald's and have 35 staff and be the manager.
Yeah.
Those skills are not valued when we take them outside of hospitality or retail and put them in another environment. So how do we do that? We do that by having a skills mindset. So at Y Careers, it's all about the skills. It's all about creating a career portfolio for young people and to be able to look at what are the different skills that you have that you may not be able to articulate and how can those skills be used? And while you're doing that, how do we give you the coaching? How do we give you additional qualifications? How do we work with you on enterprise skills or employability skills that employers always tell us they want from young people? And we embed them in the programs to ensure that they are learning and earning and upskilling along the journey while being supported by amazing, dedicated career coaches who can help you to do that. So we all need a mentor in our life. We all need a coach in our life. It really helps us, right? And so sometimes coming into the workforce or coming into a new workplace is daunting for anybody, let alone for young people coming into these sectors or industries where they need a bit of support and help. And what we've done is we've created vehicles and different types of solutions where we can provide that support and be an actual division or an assistance for an employer to go, we know how to look after young people and we will help you with that journey and we'll embed that into your organization. We've also developed supervisor training and capability uplift for supervisors dealing with young people. We've got education around Gen Z and understanding how to learn and work and talk to them and communicate with them and keep them engaged. So we provide all that as a support mechanism for employers considering if they want to change that mindset of let's embrace young people and how do we get them in our organization and how do we get them to stay?
You made an interesting point about the McDonald's manager at 21 in hospitality have these skills, and you're right, managing a multi-million-dollar organization. Well, why do you think they are undervalued when they come out with that skill set?
I think there's a real challenge sometimes around being able to articulate what those skills are and how they translate to other industries. So
Yep.
in partnership with Learning Creates Australia, we've been able to map those skill sets in the care economy. So we've mapped a cluster of skills. There are 13 skills that we've mapped, and we help articulate the fact that those skills are transferable into other industries. So for example, 13 of the skills care cluster that we're talking about, they're translatable into hospitality. So a young person coming in this journey can be having a transferable skill over there. I think sometimes we generally look at silos and approaches to our industries and say, well, you need these skills, you need these skills, you need this qualification. And in some cases, that has to be the case because it is specialized or it is a complex environment or it is a compliance-driven environment. But there are other skills that go across different industries where I think we don't actually value that. So a young person who has led a team of 35 has leadership skills. They have communication
Absolutely.
skills. They have the ability to manage a team and to look at rostering and look at these different pieces and understand labor costs and understand food costs. And, they know how to run a P&L. Now, do we articulate that very well when they go for the next job in another industry? I think that's the challenge we have. And the mindset for us has to change as well.
Yeah, okay. When you have placed people into organisations, what have you seen as the main benefits that organisation is realised in the first 3 months and then potentially longer term?
I think initially there's some opportunity costs. So, organizations, particularly in this sector, they're delivering a core service, which is to a young person or to an aged care resident or to someone with a lived experience with disability. That is their core business. Do they really want to be a recruitment division? We know there is high turnover in these industries. We know that, the replacement cost of having people come and go within these industries is between $7,500 and $10,000 a year. We know that agency costs across these industries are very high as well. So some of the realization with employing maybe a younger person or a person who's unqualified or bringing them in is the fact that we'll support them on that journey, and we give you the assurance that, that turnover rate will reduce because we are there to support young people from coming along that journey and staying with the organization. And we also take away some of the pain of saying, well, you're not the experts in recruitment, so let us do that for you. So there's some realizations and probably some opportunity cost. There's obviously some opportunities where we're now changing the way that workforce may look into the future by bringing young people in and changing the demographic of that organization.
Yeah, okay. So, and again, we're talking some pretty large organisations here across multiple sites, across multiple regions, etc. But from your model perspective, Amo, how scalable is the model, especially when we're getting into the regions of communities where there are those significant workforce shortages, and at some places they're at crisis levels.
Yep, we see that, and we've built Y Careers to be scalable.
Yep.
We use technology to our advantage, and we have a Y Careers app that is going to be embedded within the journey for a young person, where they can access their career coach, they can create opportunities to meet other cohorts of young people, because connections are a really important piece for young people as well. But also in terms of the regions, we're already working regionally across different parts of Australia. We're in Mount Isa, we're looking at some different places in southeast Queensland now, and we know that the regions have a really high need when it comes to workforce shortages as well. So part of our remit and part of what we have set up is to make sure we can have a regional focus and we can get out to those remote communities and really work in a place-based mentality where we embed ourselves within the community. We find out who the local people are that will be able to assist and develop and create opportunities for young people. And then we go and find those young people, and then we work and develop those young people to have a successful career in these workplaces, in those areas. The part about the scalability is the fact that the more young people we have in the program, the more young people are connected together, the more they're receiving connection from other young people and learning from other young people, but they're also going through a journey together, and they're able to experience that as a cohort, which we know is really important when it comes to completion rates or reducing attrition in traditional earn and learn models, where, say, you talk about apprenticeships or you talk about traineeships today, the average completion rate is around about 58%. But with our type of model and our type of services, we're looking at about 80-85 completion rate, which is much higher than the national average.
Yeah, okay. And so that's a good focus on the young people. But in terms of the actual entities and the businesses that are engaging these people, what sort of feedback are you getting from them around that regional piece as well? Because it's servicing them as much as it is the young people.
Yeah, we've got a provider out in Mount Isa that we've just placed 2 young people, and they had a real challenge in finding young people previously, and they're very, very happy with how that has taken place. And again, it's about building those connections with community. It's about being place-based. It's being sensitive to the community. So, we talk about, think national but act local. You have to be really specific around what that looks like, as it is different in different settings. So, but yeah, they're really happy. We also did something which is slightly different, where in some of the higher gentrified areas where they're looking for young people, where traditionally you wouldn't find a young person in those areas, and some of these council-run organisations in ECEC or early learning, they weren't able to identify or find any young people at all. But through Y Careers and through the fact that we're able to really look under the hood and get inside those communities, we find young people for those people. So Lane Cove Council was a great example of that, where they couldn't find young people for their ECEC centre, and we found young people for them, and we've got a really great successful candidate going through the program there as well.
Yeah, okay. We actually just got a great question that's come through from the audience, and one of those is around, when you talk about the support we provide to workplaces, is it through Zoom, or do you actually come out in person? And what can you just talk us through what that model looks like?
It's a combination, because obviously logistically, sometimes it can be hard to have in-person meetings and stuff, but obviously we try where we can possible to have at least some touch point that is face-to-face, and the other touch points will be through digital means, and that may be through FaceTime, and maybe through Teams, and maybe through whatever accessibility we have for a young person. One of the things that we also know is that young people don't always have digital access, but through our programs and through some of the sponsorships we've got, we're able to provide digital access to young people, and we might be able to make sure they've got data on their phones and make sure they've got accessibility to a laptop, to a computer, to provide digital access. And also for those young people that may not have those skills in those digital areas, one of our micro credentials and some of the training we've got is about understanding that digital world and how to access it as well. So being really conscious that not everybody has the ability to gain that access, but we'll try and assist them with that.
Yep.
And face to face, at least once, twice, 4 times across the journey, where possible, we'll try and do that as well.
Okay, great. Another question from the floor, is a similar theme, is get a lot of calls from young people into organisations, but we find it takes a lot of time to process and work out if they'll be right for us. Can you just talk us through how Y Careers makes that easier for them?
I think in terms of that, it's communication strategies. Obviously, phone calls, depending on the demographic and the young person, not always going to work. Text messaging we find is fantastic, and there's different methodologies to do that, and different ways of learning and understanding how that communication will work, but also work out if they're right for the job. So that skill mindset is what we're talking about again. So how do you assess those skills? How do you assess I suppose people always say, we want someone who has a great attitude. How do you know that? So through our processes with a really responsive and agile recruitment team, we've got methodologies and we've got systems and processes in place to draw that out. But also having organizations who are value aligned with us to not make that process the old-fashioned rigid process that might be really daunting for a young person. We recommend different methodologies of doing that. So we will do the sourcing and the ability of vetting and bringing qualified young people to the organizations who we think are aligned with the values or the skill sets, the attribute, very traditional in terms of the hiring manager will give us a position description, we match that, but then bringing them on site, having a bit of a morning tea, walking around the centre, having a look at what it might look like, seeing it, understanding this is the type of job that it's going to be, this is what we'll be doing and entailing it. Almost a little bit of like a show and tell as part of the screening process has really helped in some of these industries, because not everybody really understands what it will be like to work maybe in aged care or disability or childcare. So changing that hiring process has been really key in terms of being able to try and find the match of what we would deem as normally a position description, skills in a set. We look at a resume and match it. We take the traditional model and turn it on its head a little bit so that we're actually thinking about skill sets and mindsets and attitudes.
Yeah, I imagine it keeps a lot of our audience up at night. Where am I going to get my next one from? But and are they going to be right? Yeah. Guess in terms of how do you ensure we're not just creating the jobs, but we're actually providing a genuine career path with that long-term potential that you talked about earlier? How do we know, and how can the people on the call give consideration to that?
The beauty of what we're trying to do is we're trying to expose young people to these industries and sectors through different vehicles, whether that be a vehicle through a traineeship program where they're learning and they're developing. The employer is able to work with that young person and develop a young person and provide that pathway by articulating what does that look like into the future. I think a lot of times when we start a job or anyone starts a job, and it's not just a young person, it's like, what's my pathway? Where am I going to go? And traditionally, you might be able to look at that and look at an org chart, or you might be able to see different pathways. Today, the pathways are not linear. They can go in zigzags and all over the place. So we articulate that by working with the employees and saying, well, if a young person finishes this qualification, let's map that and show them what are the different pathways and what are the opportunities. They might become a team leader, they might become a supervisor, they might become a centre director, they might become a regional director one day. Fantastic. That looks like a pretty traditional linear pathway. But what else could they do? If they've got a passion for marketing, oh, there's a marketing department. If they've got a passion for sales, actually, we've got a sales department. If they've got a passion for food and beverage, oh, we actually have a catering department and a procurement department. So you might think that I'm starting in aged care as a personal care worker, or I'm starting in disability, but the pathway has not been articulated to me. So I'm not really sure, but as I go along the journey, if we can demonstrate what those pathways look like, we tend to see young people knowing that there's a future for them in different areas and that they can see that I can actually get somewhere with this opportunity.
Yeah, and when you sort of put it that way, you don't give consideration to all those other elements and divisions of organisations that they can actually grow themselves into as they learn more about what their intended focus is, if you like, or what they really want to do. Yeah, I'm conscious of time. We are going to get close to the button here, but in terms of for the decision makers in the room who want to act, what's the first step they can genuinely take to start to drive and build a youth-driven workforce from a strategy perspective?
You have to value the proposition that young people are going to contribute in a really meaningful way to your organization. And if you haven't engaged with young people, or it's not a traditional model for you, or you haven't been starting to think about those things, you need to consider it. You need to understand what may you need to change, or what may you need to develop, or what might you need to do for your culture. The environment is not any different really, but at the same time, every employee wants to feel valued. So do young people. Every employee wants to feel like they're contributing. So do young people. Maybe there's different methodologies in communication. Maybe there's different methodologies in hiring practices. Maybe there's different ways of, working and creating teams and flexibility around workforces so that people can have that opportunity. It is pretty similar to anything you would do for your organizations, but there are probably some nuances that you would consider that maybe you would adapt, or you would change, or be a bit more agile on when you're bringing young people into your organization. There is really some amazing evidence around that intergenerational piece too, about making sure we've got the generations within an organization. We know that diversity in all means creates better innovation, higher sales, an organization that is really strong and flourishing. And this is one part of that diversity strategy, about changing the demographic and age demographic of your organization and embracing young people for who they are and what they can deliver, and not being afraid or scared, or not really feeling that they're going to be a challenge and it's too much hard work and it's going to be a burden. But hey, let's take this innovative, amazing, focused young people and let's try and embed them into our organizations and give them a career into the future.
Yeah. And you talked about the nuances, and you probably explained them in a little bit. Is there anything you can add to those nuances for the audience so they can sort of make that change or start to think about how do we start to develop that strategy?
I think young people have a voice, and I think that if you're able to accept the fact that they will have a voice within your organization, and they're not afraid to walk up to the CEO and ask about, do you have an ESG policy, or what's the next role for me? And rather than taking offense to that and saying, oh, look at this young privileged person, they want my
Upstart.
job in the first step, reverse that and go, okay, so that's fantastic. They're ambitious, or they actually want to challenge some of our status quos, and they actually want to look at things doing in a different way, and we've never thought about things that way. So we have to embrace that. We have to take that as and accept that as our responsibility as employers, that we should look at how they're going to be able to contribute to the future and actually be the future of our workforce, because it is an aging population, it is an aging workforce, and we're already there. 40% of the workforce is young people. It's only going to get larger.
Yeah. Thanks, Emma. That's been incredibly insightful. Like, in sort of winding up, we've got a couple of minutes, perhaps a quick answer for you. I haven't left much time for this one, but if finally, what do we risk across the sector and for our communities if we don't start investing in the next generation of educators and carers now? What does it look like?
It looks like a huge workforce shortage. We need 110,000 workers by 2030 for the sector. There's 49,000 shortage in the ECEC, early childcare sector now as well. The gap will not be bridged. So we have to look at this as an opportunity. We have to look at this as an opportunity to change the workforce and really realize the potential of young people across all industries. And not every industry has that opportunity, but at the same time, where will your workforce be in 2040, 2050, if you haven't been able to attract, retain, and embrace the power of young people?
Yeah. Wow, there's a bit to consider. There's a bit to consider. So, everyone, thank you very much. And that brings to close our executive briefing session today. And I trust you found it insightful and thought-provoking around how we can start to combat some of the resource challenges we know we're going to experience and you're going to experience in your business, probably now, but even in the short-term future. Look, it goes without saying that if you do want to discuss this in further detail, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll also forward a recording of today's briefing for you so that you and your colleagues can share that with them if you want to share part of this. If you deem that a good fit, we welcome you to do so. So thanks again, Amo, for joining us. Thanks to the audience for coming on board today. And we look forward to being able to support you with whatever you need future-wise. Have a great rest of the day.